connections. Okay, so again, thank you again for joining us for a disability etiquette for positive connections. Welcome. Again, my name is Denise Howard. I am the program director for life and part of the admin team. And also presenting with me are my colleagues, Angel Donardi, who is our associate director and HOMOD coordinator, Clay Mims, our nursing home transition coordinator, Jenny Snyder, our outreach and advocacy coordinator, Lisa Barnes, our support coordinator, and Melanie Berry, who is our office manager and community educator. And all of us today are representing Life Incorporated. And just to give you a little information about Life, we are a nonprofit organization operated by and for people with disabilities. We're located here in Savannah, right on Waters, and we have a satellite office in Scriven. And I'd like you to think of us as your Southeast Disability Resource Center. We're your one stop. If you have a disability related question or issue, give us a call and we may be able to help or at least point you in the right direction. Our mission is promoting independent living and advancing community change for everyone. And at Life, we envision and work towards a world where people with disabilities are valued equally and participate fully in their community. So all of our services are centered around the full independence, access, and full participation of individuals with all disabilities. Um, our core services include advocacy, information and referral, independent living skills training, peer support, and both youth transition and nursing home transition. Nursing home transition is getting people out of institutions back in the community. And youth transition, we work with high school students and young adults to prepare them to live independently and to achieve their employment and other independent living goals. We also provide help with assistive technology and adaptive equipment, home modifications, and we provide community education, including topics such as emergency preparedness, creating alternate formats, materials in alternate formats such as Braille, large print, and audio. We provide accessibility site reviews and training like today's training, disability etiquette on how to interact with people with various disabilities. So we will share our contact information at the end of this presentation. So feel free to reach out to us. We have a lot of information that we're going to be sharing today. So again, if you want to know more, feel free to contact us. So our goal for today is to promote better understanding, raise awareness, and help to dispel myths for interacting with several disability types. We can't speak on behalf of every person with a disability, but we hope the information we offer will provide insight and help to normalize the disability experience. Approximately 1.4 million Georgians have a disability that impact their ability to hear, see, think, to move, to communicate. And the reality is that disability is a natural part of the human experience. It's just part of life and could become a part of anyone's story at any time. So while barriers to physical spaces and services has improved thanks to advocacy and the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA for short, People with disabilities often encounter attitudinal barriers. And of course, attitudinal barriers stem from misconceptions and assumptions and prejudices towards individuals with disabilities, or just not knowing a person with a disability, not interacting with us. So, addressing attitudinal barriers is always the first step in disability etiquette and creating accessibility. So, if you take away only one thing today, we hope it's this: see the person beyond their disability. Disability is certainly a part of who we are, but it doesn't define us. Uh, Even if we're with a companion or a caregiver, speak directly to a person with a disability. We can talk and we don't bite. So don't talk down to us. We are people who want to live, work, and participate in all aspects of life with dignity, equal rights, and access. So behave in the same courteous and respectful way that you would want to be treated. And above all, if you are unsure of how to interact with a person with a disability or in doubt about anything, please just ask, because there's no need to feel awkward.
Morning, Alice!
There's no need to be awkward.
Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping?
I got you.
Wait, ah! Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
What?
Please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't address me just because I have a great smile.
Just because I'm blind
May I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
I don't know. I think he said he was gonna come, but... Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi. Would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Alice.
Morning.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human.
Okay. I think the video, it sums it up. Everything we're trying to say sums it up in a nutshell. Words have power. Words have power. That's a very true statement because it impacts the way we think and the way we behave. And over time, words and language, it evolves, it changes. So things that may have been okay to say in the 60s or the 70s or 80s may be outdated today. So here is a list of words that have become outdated and try to avoid them. Words such as handicap can be, again, if it's outdated, can be offensive. So avoid terms such as handicap, invalid, afflicted, suffers from, retarded, crippled, victim, wheelchair bound, or confined to a wheelchair. Instead of saying handicap, say person with a disability. Instead of saying that someone is a stroke victim, consider them a stroke survivor. Instead of saying someone is retarded, say they have an intellectual disability. Or a person who uses a wheelchair isn't wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair. That wheelchair is a sense of mobility and freedom. So the person is a wheelchair user or uses a wheelchair. There are a couple of ways of referring to people with disabilities. There is person first language. Person first language emphasizes the person before the disability. For an example, person who is blind, a person who has cerebral palsy, a person with spinal injury. That's considered a disability first language. Another way of referring to people with disabilities is identity first language. And in identity first language, it puts the disability first in the description. In other words, autistic person or disabled person or blind person. So either way can be equally appropriate. It just depends on the person's preference. But until you know a person's preference, as a professional, I would start with disability first language. I'm a person who's blind, and I'm also a proud blind person. Again, identity first language just acknowledges that disability is a culture with a history and it's an identity. But again, ask a person their preference, but see a person beyond their label because labels are for cans, not for people. Because a label on a can will tell you what's in that can, but it doesn't tell you what's inside of a person. So when in doubt, call a person with a disability by their name. So here are some practical tips for um, best practices for interacting with people with disabilities and eliminating barriers. And again, here is where life is a resource. We provide complimentary accessibility site reviews. We can come to your facility and, assess what may be a barrier and help you to resolve those issues because some things you just may not have thought about. But here are some practical tips to keep in mind. Eliminate barriers to improve access for people with disabilities. Ensure that digital spaces such as websites and social media are accessible, offer materials in alternate formats such as large print, braille, audio, and accessible electronic formats. Always use plain, simple to understand language and train all staff how to interact with people with disabilities. That's very key. So, again, if you need help, we're here for you. Life is there. So, next up for tips for universal design is Miss Melody Berry.
Thank you, Denise. Hello, I am Melanie Berry, and I am a wheelchair user due to a spinal cord injury. And I am going to start by talking to you about the universal approach. Since it's not always possible to see that someone has a disability, a universal approach is the best approach. A universal approach is about normalizing disability and adjusting your perception or preconceived notions. If you proactively consider the needs of everyone, including those with disabilities, when, for example, creating events, designing spaces, or workplaces, then you have a universal mindset and approach. Key principles of a universal attitude is one, respect and dignity. Treat people with disabilities as individuals. Avoid pity or hero narratives. Instead, recognize their anatomy and abilities. Two, assumption and competence. Always presume that people with disabilities are capable and should have the same opportunities as everyone else. Three, proactive inclusion. Design spaces, events, and experiences with people with disabilities, not just for them. Engage them in decision making and planning. Number four, normalizing accessibility. Accessibility should not be treated as a special consideration, but as a standard practice in all settings. Number five, active allyship and advocacy. Speak up against discrimination, promote accessibility, and educate others on disability rights and inclusion. Listen to and amplify the voices of people with disabilities. Number six, continuous learning and openness. Be open to feedback and willing to learn from people with disabilities about their needs and preferences. Adapt and improve based on lived experience. And number seven, celebrating diversity. Recognize that disability is a natural part of human diversity. Embrace different ways of thinking, moving, communicating, and experiencing the world. A universal design. To expand the concept of universal approach to attitudes, universal design is the foundation of creating inclusive environments. It involves designing spaces and services that can be used by the widest range of people, regardless of their disability status. Make your space as universally accessible as possible, both physically and attitudinally. Normalize the disability experience by embracing it as a matter of course instead of as a special need. So that video just showed how having a universal design where the entrance of the business was accessible for all, not just individuals with disabilities. And it was not big of a major change to the structure of the business, but it was open and available and accessible for all. So now I'm going to pass it over to Angel.
Thank you, Melanie. Such important things to talk about. And there is so much to talk about. We know we're covering a lot in a short amount of time. So, again, feel free to reach out to us for clarification or just more information or just to interact. So, I'm going to talk about first interacting with people who have invisible or what could be non apparent disabilities. This category applies to me as my disability type is largely invisible. I was born with a genetic disorder that I've lived with my whole life. And except for the times when I was wearing a back brace or was a wheelchair user for one reason or another, or was actively injured, which is commonly the result of my disability, you wouldn't know to just glance at me that I have a disability. But in any group of people, it's safe to assume there is someone who experiences a form of disability. So please don't assume that if you can't easily see a disability, that none exists. Human beings have a tendency to believe what they can see. And so they tend to judge those that say they have a disability, but it's not obvious. And so living with an invisible disability means facing challenges that aren't always seen, but are always felt. Over 42 million Americans have a significant disability, and a staggering 96% of those disabilities are not obvious. There are hurtful stigmas around invisible disabilities, and so people don't readily disclose it. For me, having an invisible disability was kind of a double-edged sword. I took advantage of it being invisible when I was younger and wanted to be quote unquote normal, but I absolutely don't feel that way anymore. Because as an older person, I realized that nobody's completely normal, but also it didn't really benefit my family and friends who didn't really understand what was happening to me. So my trying to hide it was not beneficial, but it was a matter of trust. And a lot of people with invisible disabilities don't disclose it because of the stigmas. So it's a personal choice if and when a person shares their disability status. And the key to making spaces, events, workplaces accessible for people with invisibility, in that's a good word, invisibility, is like Melanie shared, is to actually have the universal mindset and an inclusive approach. So just assume that if you're in a group of people that someone has a disability. If you do become aware that a person has an invisible disability, please resist the urge to say, but you don't look disabled. This comment might seem harmless, but it can really be invalidating and dismissive to someone with an invisible disability. And so, what does disability look like? That could be a whole conversation, right? So, maybe what to say instead is, I believe you. How can I support you? A little understanding goes a long way. So, instead of questioning someone's disability, offering support and empathy and access can make a world of difference. The best tactic may be to simply speak with the person and ask them what kind of accommodations they might need, if any, to make their visit safer and more enjoyable. There is a couple of myths associated. People who can walk but park in accessible parking spots are faking a disability. That's highly unlikely. It does happen. But I would challenge you to not assume the worst of someone. If you see someone who has the proper credentials parking an accessible parking spot, either their license plate or the hang tag, assume that they've got the right to use that. Please don't challenge them just because you cannot see their disability. Another common myth is that people with non-apparent disabilities never use wheelchairs or other mobility aids. That's also a myth. So I'm going to turn it back over to our awesome Denise Howard, who's going to talk about tips for interacting with people who are blind or low vision.
Thank you, Angel. Okay, so this one hits pretty close to home. Tips for interacting with someone who's blind or low vision. So, as a person who's blind myself, it's helpful if you identify yourself so that I get to know your voice. Also, I would add, I touched on this earlier, but when approaching someone with a disability, please speak directly to the individual. Don't just speak to their companion or caregiver. Speak directly to the individual because we do talk. Address me by name. That way, I know that you're speaking to me and not someone else. And this is important because I can't see if you're looking at me. So either get my attention by saying my name or uh, let me know that you're speaking directly to me and not someone else. Okay, say goodbye or see you later or something to indicate that you're leaving the room. And that way I'm not left talking to the air or talking to someone who's not there. When speaking, use words instead of gestures only. Or if you use gestures, it just won't be able to see you. Also, when offering help to someone who's blind or low vision, I never grab my white cane, offer your arm instead, and walk at a normal pace. And just let me know if there's any steps coming up, any obstacles to step up or down, etc. And don't worry about using words like look or see or watch. These are words that are part of everyday conversation and aren't offensive. So I say things like, I watch TV. Hey, look at this. Or did you see the show? And again, those words that seem to relate to someone's disability, they're just part of everyday speech and not offensive. And remember, life is here. Please take us up on our offer for that ADA accessibility site survey. Okay, this is a myth. Myth. It's always easy to tell if someone is blind or low vision. Fact. It isn't always obvious. And looking for dark glasses or a cane may be misleading. So, next up to give us tips for interacting with service animals is Miss Lisa Barnes.
Hello, I'm Lisa Barnes, and I am a person that lives with an invisible disability. When you speak to the handler rather than the dog. The service dog and the handler are a team. If you want to talk to them, always speak to the person first. The animal is working, and the person's life could depend on the dog staying focused. Never interact with a service dog without asking permission first, but do seek out and the handler if the service dog approaches you by itself, as the handler might be in a crisis. Never offer food to a service dog. Keep your own dog a distance away from a working dog. Treat the owner, handler with sensitivity and respect. Don't assume a napping service dog is off duty. Service dogs do get to just be dogs. Working dogs typically get plenty of R&R and playtime. When they are home and off duty, they are free to behave like any other dog. In situations in situation where it is not obvious that the dog is a service animal, you may ask only two specific questions. One, is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? Two, what work or task had the dog been trained to perform? Title 2 and 3 of the ADA makes it clear that service animals are allowed in public facilities and accommodations, including healthcare settings. A service animal must be allowed to accompany the handler to any place in the building or facility where members of the public are allowed. You can contact the Southeast ADA Center at 1 800 949 4232 for more information. And next, we'll have CT to talk to you about the law, the ADA law, and it matters.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clay Mims. I was born with cerebral palsy, and when I was 8 years old, I got in a car accident and was severely injured. I may do things a little differently, however, I'm able to complete any task, desire, or goal in my life. And I go into every day with the attitude that I never give up and I never lose. So let's talk about the ADA and the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was a hard-won federal civil rights lawsuit that prohibits the discrimination against people with disabilities. The ADA requires that public accommodations be accessible to people with disabilities. The ADA ensures that people with disabilities have access to state and local government programs and services. This can be done through reasonable modifications of policies, practices, and procedures, adjusting policies, practices, and procedures if needed to provide goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations. Effective communication, making communication in all forms easily understood. Accessible facilities, ensuring the physical accessibility. All places covered by the ADA must provide access to their facilities and programs for people with disabilities. A person with a disability can be a person with a mobility or physical disability, sensory, vision or hearing, intellectual, psychiatric, or other mental disability. People with medical conditions such as HIV and AIDS, epilepsy, rheumatoid arthritis, and cancer may also be covered under the ADA. The link below can be referenced for specific examples of improving access to physical spaces, communication, and services. All right. ADA tip. People with disabilities are the largest and fastest growing minority in the U.S. They control 1 trillion in total annual income. They have friends, family members, and business colleagues who accompany them to events and outings. They use businesses and facilities that are accessible to them. So how can businesses provide access to people with disabilities? They can begin by opening their doors, literally. Accessible doors welcome everyone, and they're required by law. You can learn more about the specifics in the link below. And next up, I'm going to go over some tips for interacting with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Don't rush. Don't rush. Trust is built slowly. If the person is having trouble understanding you, repeat yourself using different words without getting frustrated. Use plain language, short sentences, and simple, concrete words. If speaking to an adult, keep all conversations at an adult level. Use a calm voice and be reassuring. Individuals can usually tell if you are being talked down to, which can make a situation worse. Treat adults as adults. Encourage self-advocacy and opportunities for autonomy. Keep your manner encouraging rather than correcting. A person with IDD may be sensitive to tone of voice. Don't speak loudly or harshly. Give extra time for the person to process what you are saying to respond. Look for signs of stress and or confusion, and treat each person as an individual with talents and abilities deserving of respect and dignity. And next, I'm going to hand it back over to Lisa for tips with interacting with people with mental health and behavior disabilities.
All right. Myth. People with mental or behavioral disabilities are more likely to be violent than those without psychiatric disabilities. The behaviors associated with mental or behavioral disabilities range from passive to disruptive. When the illness is active, the individual may or may not be at risk of harming themselves or others. Those with mental or behavioral disabilities are not more likely to be violent than those without. Treat people with mental or behavior disabilities as individuals. Do not make assumptions based on your previous experiences with others who have psychiatric disabilities. There is no one size fits all. Respect a person's choice of language and terminology. People with mental or behavioral disabilities do not necessarily need extra assistance or need to use medications. Everyone is an individual. Treat them with respect and dignity. Just like anyone else, individuals with mental health disabilities deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Avoid assumptions. Mental health conditions vary widely, and people manage them differently. Do not assume what they can or cannot do. Some individuals may need extra time to process information or respond in conversation. If someone shares their experience, experiences, listen with an open mind and without offering unsolicited advice. Stay calm and non confrontational. If someone is experiencing distress, remain calm and speak in a soothing tone. Ask how you can help. Simple questions like, would you like me to call someone for you? Can be supportive. Respect their coping mechanisms. If they need time to self regulate, give them space when possible. Know when to seek help. If someone is in immediate danger to themselves or others, contact emergency services while ensuring they are treated with care and respect. Speak in a calm and clear manner. Avoid using a condescending or overly simplistic tone. Respect personal space. Some individuals may have sensory sensitivities or discomfort with close physical proximity. Be mindful of triggers. Loud noises, aggressive body language, or certain words may cause distress. Pay attention to cues. Offer support, not solutions. Instead of saying, just snap out of it, ask, how can I support you? Avoid stigmatizing language. Words like crazy, insane, or unstable can be harmful. And now I'll give it back to Miss Angel.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to cover a little bit about what does deaf mean. And I'm going to preface this by saying that although we do include deafness, because it doesn't always exist as a standalone with an individual, often there are coexisting disabilities. But many people in deaf culture or persons who are deaf do not consider themselves to have a disability. So that's really something to know and be aware of. And I'm going to play this video by people who are deaf because they can do it a lot better than I can.
Deafness is a spectrum. It's not just one definition. Someone like myself who's late deafened.
I am deaf in one ear and hearing in the other. Some people view me as a deaf person, some view me as hearing, but it's not one or the other.
I was born deaf. My father is deaf in one ear, so it's hereditary.
I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. The 3 youngest are deafblind.
I switch between deaf and disabled because I'm also a little person.
Being deaf is a big part of who I am. But that's not my only identity. I'm a person of color, biracial, half black and half white, and gay.
This is the condition I have. It's called Usher syndrome. It's a hearing and vision loss.
I grew up oral.
A lot of people consider me hard of hearing.
People do call me hearing impaired, but I'm not. I'm deaf.
People think being deaf is a bad thing, but I see it as a positive thing. The culture, language, and history make me who I am today.
The deafblind community, tactile ASL, the use of space, the culture, all became a part of it.
I'm learning little by little about Protactor and I can't wait to learn more. I am most comfortable with speaking English.
People with additional disabilities have to think about access and what they want. Do they know what they need?
Throughout educational years, I used note takers. I didn't have interpreters because I didn't know sign language. I didn't know ASL until I was 14. I used cued speech and was mainstreamed throughout high school.
I went to a public school in the morning, then a deaf school in the afternoon. It was the best of both worlds. The instructors used ASL, which I found to be more inclusive.
I was in both deaf and hearing classes. I wore that bilateral hearing aid cinched across my chest. Very unpleasant.
I got a cochlear implant when I was 15 and went through intensive speech therapy.
In high school, I would sit to the far right, since I could hear on my left side.
In large group discussions where there's dynamic conversation, I use interpreters.
In my own experience, captioning and interpreting together are the most effective.
I want more of a long-term designated interpreter. Someone who knows me well, who knows my work.
As a black person, I want my interpreter's voice to match me. My culture can't be overlooked.
People automatically think deaf people are all the same, but that's not true. We have layers upon layers.
When you meet us, have an open mind and open heart.
Okay. So, again, those who are deaf do not necessarily consider themselves to have a disability. However, it is important to communicate with our fellow human beings. So, the important thing is if we do encounter a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, it's important to again, and we've emphasized this multiple times, always talk directly to the person, even if they're using the interpreter. And I know this can be a little awkward at first because the interpreter is standing there and they're actually interpreting, but they're interpreting for the person who is deaf. And you're actually speaking to the person who is deaf. So speak in a clear, normal tone of voice, look at the person and speak naturally. A person with significant hearing loss will rely also on facial expressions, gestures, and movements to better understand what you're trying to communicate. So be patient if they need clarification or repetition. Individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing communicate in various ways. So pay attention to cues, such as whether they're using sign language, reading lips, writing, or gesturing. And do not be afraid to say if you don't understand the person's speech. It's better to find another way to communicate, such as through writing notes, if that's appropriate, rather than to pretend to understand. Never shout at a person that is deaf or hard of hearing unless someone has asked you to speak up or speak loudly. Get the attention of a person who is deaf or hard of hearing by waving your hand, tapping their shoulder, or through some other appropriate gesture. Don't put your hands in front of your face or food or your drink or other items in your mouth when communicating with someone who's reading lips. It's a very nuanced skill, and they need to really be able to see you clearly. Also, don't turn your head or walk away while talking. And when possible, speak in a well-lit room that's free from background noises. Talk with the individual about their preferred method of communication. And when possible, in a professional setting, provide a qualified sign language interpreter, videos that are captioned, and train your staff on 711 relay service etiquette. Some myths are that all people with hearing loss are totally and completely deaf. That's often not the case. That all people with hearing loss understand and participate in deaf culture and understand sign language. That's not always the case. And another misconception is that all people with hearing loss can read lips. Like I said, that's a very nuanced skill and not really all that common. So I'm going to move on to tips for interacting with people with speech disabilities. Often deafness can go hand in hand with speech disabilities, but not necessarily. I was the caregiver for a person who was a stroke survivor, and it did affect their speech and still does to this day, many, many years later. And one thing I observed is that people would ask a question and just keep going, and it could be an important question, like, how can I help you? Or what do you need? That kind of thing. And they just keep on trucking, and the person doesn't have a chance to respond. So people tend to be impatient. I think we can all find ourselves relating to that. And again, patience is key. And please don't be tempted to finish the sentence of a person with a speech disability, because no matter how long it takes the person, allow them the dignity and the time they need to say everything they wish to say. Never pretend to know what a person is saying. Instead, ask the person to repeat or rephrase. And if it's suitable, offer pen and paper. Please don't assume that a person with a speech disability also has a cognitive disability. That's often not the case. Always look directly at the person you're communicating with. And again, slow down. For people who are nonverbal, try to use alternate forms of communication. Sometimes it's sign language interpreter, gestures, AAC devices, which is augmentative and alternative communication. And always, I think this is the key, remember the importance of listening to understand, not just to reply. And of course, don't ever mock a person or mimic their speech. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who's going to share with us about people who are neurodivergent.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jenny Snyder, and I am the advocacy coordinator at LIFE. and I'm an autistic person. I was diagnosed with autism when I was in my early 40s. I like being autistic. I like how it feels to be autistic. I have my challenges, but I like who I am, and to me, autism is always a real adventure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about neurodivergence, and while I can't really speak for people with things like Tourette's syndrome or ADD. I can speak to autism. And what neurodivergence means, it basically means that we're different in mental or neurological ways of functioning from what most people consider to be like the norm. The term is most frequently used in reference to people on autism on the autism spectrum. And it's a new term. Neurodivergence is not, we've just begun starting talking about that in the last 10 or 20 years. So about 15 to 20% of the world's population has signs of neurodivergence, and an estimated 1 in 5 to 6 children are neurodivergent. So the term neurodivergent is not a medical diagnosis. A neurodivergent person is someone whose brain processes information in a way that's not the same as other people. We just think differently. And this can include people with condition like autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, obsessive compulsive disorder, and Tourette's syndrome. And it's not to be confused with dementia. It's also important to recognize neurodiversity because neurodiversity, like the way that we think, is diverse just like all other kinds of diversity. Whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, it's important for everyone to feel like we're mentally and physically safe and that we're accepted for who we are. There's no right or wrong way to experience the world, just different ways. The term neurodiversity denotes accepting and accommodating brain-based differences, and it recognizes the importance of adapting environments and attitudes for those who are neurodivergent. And it's funny because it's just kind of dawning on me that so much of what all of this is inclusion. And, inclusion has become sort of like a curse word lately. But I think that this etiquette stuff, it all goes back to that idea of like, we want to disabled people, I want to be included. I want to be a part of things. So much of this is about inclusion. But tips for interacting with people who are neurodivergent: please don't shame people who don't fit in line with the regular social behaviors. We all have different ways of behaving. And when we don't go by the standards of social behavior, it's often people often automatically see us as sort of abnormal or even less human. And we don't want to shame. Shaming affects us all, but most prominently, it shames people who experience themselves as different or who are seen as different. And and please don't yell at neurodivergent people for being generally disruptive. Things like echolalia, tics, and other like sudden movements that are often uncontrollable to the person. And these interruptions are often misunderstood as being disrespectful, but it's not being disrespectful. Communicating, understanding, and coming to a place of common respect with that person is the most essential thing. And please don't police speaking and thinking patterns. We all talk differently. We all think differently. We just are all different. Society expects us all to think literally, linearly, and to judge people by their, oops, can you go back one? Oh, great. Also, please don't police speaking and thinking patterns. So, yeah, society expects us to think linearly, and they can judge us if we kind of speak differently from other people. And so rarely do we embrace and allow for the diversity of different forms of speaking and communicating. And in doing this, we not only limit our own expression, but force people who display that divergence to work twice as hard to convey their ideas. And also quiet rooms and sensory rooms. You guys have probably heard of these. And for people who have autism or some of the other neurodivergent conditions, our experience of life can be really just very intense and overwhelming. And sounds, sights, lights, textures, tastes can all be kind of overwhelming for us. So, and especially the social aspect of it can be overwhelming for us. So it's so important to let people have a chance to be in a quiet space. And that's what quiet rooms are all about, is just giving us a chance to be alone, to sort of de-stimulate ourselves. But, all right, thank you guys. And now I'm going to pass it back to Melanie.
Thank you, Jenny. So now I'm going to just give you a few tips for interacting with people who have mobility disabilities. Wheelchairs, canes, braces, walkers, and other mobility devices are means of freedom, which allows us to move about independently. Don't assume that using a mobility aid is a tragedy, because it's not. It's a very valuable tool. Never attempt to help without asking first. Speak directly to the person and not about them. If the conversation with a wheelchair user lasts more than a few minutes, sit down or kneel to get on the same eye level as the person in the wheelchair. A person's wheelchair or other mobility aid is a part of their personal space. Never grab, hang, or lean on a mobility aid unless you have their express permission. Don't make assumptions about mobility functions based on appearance or the use of assistive devices. For example, individuals who use mobility aids such as canes, braces, walkers, or wheelchair have varying degrees of mobility and may use the mobility aid regularly or only as needed. People who don't appear to have a mobility disability may still require accommodations such as accessible parking because they are unable to walk long distances. When giving a wheelchair user directions, beware of architectural barriers such as narrow doorways, stairs, curbs, etc. Wheelchair accessible ramps benefit everyone, so don't block access to them with your car or belongings. When parking next to an accessible parking lot, be sure not to block the sidewalk access to the car doors, and don't park on the stripes. Make sure check-in counters, exam tables, and etc. are accessible from wheelchair height whenever possible. If you don't have a disability and anticipate occupying a bathroom stall for a long period of time, do not use the accessible one, even if it's the first to become available. A common myth is that wheelchair users can't walk. And the fact is that some wheelchair users can walk. Some also use other mobility aids, such as braces, walkers, or crutches. They use wheelchairs some of the time to conserve energy, reduce pain, and to move about more quickly.
Okay, and I'm just going to say, I know we only have a couple of minutes. We're almost at the end, and we do, of course, respect everybody's time, but we're almost done.
Okay, and I'm just going to send it over to Denise to wrap it up for you.
Okay, thanks, Melanie.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to keep this statement in mind. Allyship matters more than ever. People with disabilities are concerned about recent government actions and statements that threaten our rights and well-being. We fear losing important hard-won protections and accessibility measures that help us live with dignity and inclusion. We are urging for continued progress, not setbacks, and insist that disability rights must not be weakened. So, in conclusion, when in doubt, ask the person. Let common courtesy and simple respect govern all of your interactions. And thank you.
Thank you, Denise, and the entire Life team. This was a very informative session, and I'm sure folks will have a bunch of questions. If you have questions, feel free to, Life has their information showing right now. Take down that information or email me, and I can send that on your behalf. Also, I want to thank you, Denise, for the statement that you just made. Um, I hear you. I see you all, and I'm definitely concerned as well, and I'm sure several of us are. If there's any way that we can put action to our concerns, please feel free to share that with me as well, and I can send that out. Or I'd love to just continue that conversation, just me personally, with all of you. So
Thank
for
you.
those who joined us a little bit later, I will be sending out this recording, and United Way is also working to house our recordings on our webpage, and I will share out how you can access that as well. Um, and that's it for me. Does anyone from Life have any final words before we end our session today?
Just thank you, everybody. Please reach out if you'd like us to replicate something. We do a lot of things that are customized. And again, be part of our community, because really all people with disabilities want to do is be part of their community as well.
It was a pleasure meeting everyone today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.